Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Enlightening Your Way. I am your host, Nancy Lombardo. We are airing live tonight on the Lilydale Assembly official Facebook page and YouTube channel. I'm a leaseholder in Lilydale and the president of the Church Living Spirit, which is an independent spiritualist church on the grounds. I'm a military veteran, retired police detective, fitness and yoga instructor, and wellness is my passion. This show is a combination of my many life experiences, and it features various topics and guests to help enrich one's mind, body, and soul on your pathway to healthy living. My website is Wellness with Nancy Lombardo, where my motto is protecting and serving your well-being. And I'm happy to introduce our guest for this evening, Sherry Dworkin-Smith is a certified psychic medium, certified grief educator, and transpersonal hypnotherapist, helping those who are ready for real change. Sherry is featured in the best-selling book, Own Your Awesome and Step Into Your Authenticity. She has been listed as one of the top psychic mediums here in Florida, where she currently lives in Orlando. Sherry offers various online services, in-person coaching, and development classes. And she is the creator of the upcoming Empowered Empath Method and the popular Unspooling Your DNA online manifestation program. Sherry was also, I love this interesting fact, a pink Cadillac driving independent sales director with Mary Kay Cosmetics for over 2 decades, retiring in 2024. And that's no small task, let me tell you. And to learn everything about Sherry, check out her website at sherrydworkinsmith.com. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you. Let's just start off for our viewing audience and the guests watching that may not know much about you. Can you tell us a little bit more about you and especially how you discovered your mediumship abilities?
More than all that. Yeah.
All that.
So I am a grief educator, grief coach, hypnotherapist. I am a psychic medium. And for me, it was always there. I heard voices when I was young. There were what I called the light people would be in my bedroom. I got in trouble a lot as a little kid because my mom really felt I had that I was lying, I was making things up. So I spent a lot of time in my room. And so I never felt like I was alone. I always had, my stuffed animals would talk to me and things would move. And it was just a weird way to grow up, but it didn't seem weird until I was a little older. We didn't have Google and things like that. So when I got a little older, my knowing of things just got to be too much. And there was, the times of feeling over emotional and just out of control and so much information coming in so quickly that when I was in college, I just asked everything to go away. But I will have to tell you a really super quick, funny story. I went to the University of Rochester in upstate New York, which is very near Hydesdale and all the places where mediumship started. And so, of course, and the dorm was right next to the cemetery. So, of course, all of this, started popping when I went to school. And when a few years ago, when I had the opportunity to go to Arthur Findlay in Stansted, and I was in the museum in the castle, they had this yellow and blue banner that looked exactly like the college sports banners that would say, University of Rochester basketball or soccer or whatever it was, that said Rochester spiritualists. And it was exactly the same banner. I was like, oh my gosh. So, I know they were trying to, get me on this path, back on this path for so long. And so about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, a really good friend of mine passed away, and he became a real busybody for me to get back on this path. And so as I learned and studied and did more and more things, the hypnotherapy and the grief education just naturally felt like the next steps, especially right now. And what we've had, for the last 5 years with COVID and so much violence and war and, polarity and things like that. We just don't have enough grief resources. And, there's so many people dealing with so many different kinds of grief that don't even know what they're dealing with. And people don't know that there's help available. So, so that sort of led me full circle around. And I knew, yes, I did drive a pink Cadillac for for a long time.
I love the pink Cadillacs, might I add.
It was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous car. I was a sales director for 20 plus years. I was a Cadillac driver for more than 10, but I got to the point where I couldn't do both of these things. It's a very, very different energy to be, let's go with Mary Kay, which I love. I love the products. I'm much older than people think I am. And to do this work, which is very much a slowing down and a receiving energy. So it was really a time for me to, a few years ago, time for me to separate that. So, yeah.
Well, I forgot to make mention, and thank goodness for Facebook memories, that this is my 3-year anniversary of doing this show.
Oh my gosh, fantastic.
So happy anniversary, 3 years.
Happy anniversary to you.
I can't tell you over the 3 years, and I've heard a lot of the stories from mediums, and it's like they always come from that childhood memories of visitors in their room and, scared, kind of not scared, not knowing what's going on. But it always seems to start there, always seems to start there, which is, I love to hear that. I just love to hear those stories.
I would tell that any parents of younger kids, because when my older son, he's 28 now, and when he was about 3, he started to see things in his room. And so my husband and I, even though I was not doing this work at that time, we both understood okay, we just be calm. We're just going to talk to him. We're just going to see what's going on. And I think that's so important, because you have so many kids. You look at somebody like Tyler Henry, who's doing amazing work at such a young age. And I work with, young mediums who've come from supportive and more educated backgrounds than my parents didn't know. I didn't know. And so when we have the opportunity, I think to really support young people in knowing they're not crazy, knowing that they have abilities, that they can choose how they want to work with them. I think we really have a responsibility in how we help nurture the next generation of mediums and workers, light workers.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Totally. So when I talked to you earlier in the week and I told you I was wanting to talk about grief, and you were just like, yes, I'm all on board about that. We both agree that grief is not linear. It doesn't come just in one wave. I'm not sure if you knew, I picked the title that Living with Layers of Grief and How to Deal with It. For our topic, why did you want to get into this to begin with as a grief coach?
So years ago, so when in 2009, when the housing market collapsed in the banks and all this stuff. Okay. So Bank of America tried to steal our house, and because of a clerical error, and you can read it. This is the story I tell in the Own Your Awesome book. But because of a clerical error, that Bank of America lost our mortgage for about 6 months, and we had been paying it, and they kept taking the money. And then 6 months later, they were like, hey, you owe us all this money. So we fought with Bank of America for all this time. And in the end, here's my house. We win. And, my house is safe and everything was fine. And it's a very long story. But at the end of that, because Bank of America called me from 8 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, every 30 to 45 minutes, every day, 7 days a week for 3.5 years.
Oh my God.
And that was a level of harassment that was just, and there was no recourse at that time. And so when it was all over, thanks to a guy named Iggy in the office of the president of the Bank of America, I fell into this massive depression. I mean, suicidal, just a massive depression. And you would think it would go the other way, that you would be like, woo, yeah, but I just sunk and I couldn't find my way out, and there were no resources. And when you're down in the bottom of a hole, because grief does not make sense and grief is not linear. And, when you think you should be cheering about something, that this is a good thing that happened, and it was. And I do understand years later that journey is what brought me here. And so I'm grateful, we have to be grateful for the mud that we slog through, but there were no resources. And I would sit online and I would Google things, and there were no resources. And 2 things happened that were very important. One is that Gloria Vanderbilt died, and her son, Anderson Cooper, started a podcast called All There Is. And I applaud Anderson from, with anything that I have, because he was the first person to really be out starting to talk about grief. And while we're not necessarily taking the same approach, it is a really, really important conversation. And I talk to so many people in my work who just it's like drowning, slowly drowning, and you just don't know where to turn or that there's even resources available. And the other thing that happened was that renowned grief expert David Kessler started a grief certification program. And so I was very lucky to be accepted into the second cohort, and to work with some amazing people and to be trained by just incredible, people, because this was something that just, as spirit will do, landed right in your lap at the right time. And I knew immediately that if I could help, as mediums, we help people deal with grief and know that their loved ones are still there and that they're not alone and they're with us. And that is an incredible amount of healing, but it doesn't always deal with the grief. It's not like we go, oh, okay, my Aunt Sally's still there. Great, I'm good to go. It doesn't work that way. And so to be able to offer some other aspect of healing was just so profound to me. And as you know from the work that we do, when we are helping to heal others, we are working on helping to heal ourselves as well. And so this was just, I knew it was completely spirit-led, that I was called into this position. And it's something I'm grateful for, to be able to help every day. So.
Synchronicities. I love that you told that story. Iggy's such an unusual name, but it was my grandfather's name.
Really? Well,
yeah. Totally.
God bless him.
Yeah, for sure.
And day.
It leads right into my next question, because so often people think of grief automatically as being connected to death, grief, death. But there's so many other things that people grieve that I don't even think they understand they grieve. Would you agree with that? And
I 100% agree with that. I mean, we have things like unexpected grief and normal grief and anticipatory grief and complicated grief and delayed grief. And we can grieve the loss of a loved one. We can grieve the loss of a pet. We might grieve moving from a house to another house. We may grieve losing a job. We may grieve. In my situation with this torment with Bank of America was 3.5 years, became the norm for that period of my life. And when it was gone, it was almost like, I don't know what to hold on to. Not that I wanted to continue in that, but it was a thing that I knew was a steady, for better or worse, in my life. And so we do sometimes hold on to these things that are maybe not positives, but it's familiar. When, I was going through my healing, there were people in my life that were the life rafts, and I was very reluctant to let go of those, because then I have to grieve something else. And so we can grieve all kinds of things, and people don't understand that you might grieve something positive. We like getting married. You could have some sort of complicated feelings about what your new life might look like. I was working with one of my clients recently who had lost his wife, and we do a mediumship and coaching sessions periodically. And he had approached me about finally being interested in a potential new partner, and the complicated feelings that were around that, because this woman was not readily available, even though he was very excited to have felt like a click with someone. And when you lose your partner, very often we don't feel like we're ever going to find that click again. And when I said to him, I said, I think this is grief. I think, he's like, no, I just want you to look and see, what's going on with her, and could we be together? And I was like, no, that's psychic trespassing. We don't do that. But we're talking about grief. And he said, no, I don't think so. I said, well, let's have this conversation. And it really can be, when we want something that we think we might never have again, and then we can't have it, there's grief in that too. I mean, grief is a sneaky emotion. It's a sneaky thing. And it can show itself in so many different ways, and very unexpected ways.
You're exactly right, for sure. So what do you think layers of grief in everyday life looks like?
Oh, such a good question, Nancy. It can look like a lot of things. For some people, it looks like overeating. For some people, it may look like not eating at all. It can look like lethargy. It can look like short-temperedness or stress. It can look like manic behavior, like people who may be presenting as bipolar. That can be grief. So grief, one of my girlfriends who had lost her father a few years back, she talks about how grief is a ninja. And I think it's one of the best descriptions I've ever heard, because it can show up and manifest itself in so many different ways. And I think that's what's really important, is that people don't even think, oh, that's grief. I mean, if I'm sad and I'm crying and I'm tired and I want to be in my bed because I lost someone, we can recognize that's grief. But if I suddenly want to chop all my hair off and dye it red or blue, or I can't say purple because it's already purple, but if we do things that are erratic and very out of character, that can be grief. So there's a lot of different layers and a lot of ways that these things show up that it's not always obvious.
Yeah, that's very valid points for sure, really valid points. So how do you believe that someone can gently begin to look at grief that they've been avoiding? Because we do avoid grief.
Yes, we do. There is this idea that if I open this door, if I let myself feel it, I'll never be able to stop it. I'll never be able to close the door. Yep. And that's valid. It's not necessarily true. But it's valid, because I can never tell someone their feelings are not valid. Their feelings are their feelings. But the reality is that as much as we may cry or feel this pain of a loss, we won't feel it forever. And one of the things, I have my little visual aid because I love this idea. One of the things that I talk to my clients about, especially in the beginning, is this idea that, let me see, hope you can see this. Mm-hmm. We have this box, okay? And so this is where we live. We live in this box, okay? And every box that we have, this is my life, right? Okay, and I'm not saying live your life in a box, but for purposes. But we have this button that is the red pain button. And that button is always there. It will always be there. Something is always going to be available to stub our toe or to, whatever. But then we have this purple blob in the middle, and that's grief. And right now, when we're in the beginning of grief, when we've just had a loss, this blob is going to fill the space. It just completely fills the space. And every breath, every thought is going to hit that button and make that pain go, right? And so it feels like it will always be that way. The button will always be there. The loss will always be there. But the big glob of grief will get smaller over time. And so when we start talking with people about understanding that if you open that door and you allow yourself to feel feelings, you won't cry forever. You will probably cry for a while. You will probably cry on and off over different periods of time. But the odds are if I started crying right now, I would not continue to cry 365 days from now. And so sometimes when we are dealing with people who are in very new grief, it's helpful to try and bring their feet back to the ground and say, listen, I know it feels like this, and it's going to feel like this for a while, but that's not how it's always going to feel. And one of the other things that I really try to do, especially with new clients, is teach them something that I call little hops. Now, I'm a beach girl. I grew up on the beach in Hollywood, Florida, which is just south of Fort Lauderdale. We would go to Fort Lauderdale all the time. We would go to the beach all the time. And if you know the physics of a wave, the energy that pushes the wave is actually not at the top, the part that you see with the wave and the foam. That's not where the energy is. The energy is actually at the bottom, and it's quite small, the wave. And so if you stand in the ocean, and you've probably had some of this experience being where you live in the Panhandle, if you stand in the ocean and you plant your feet and you say, I'm not moving, even the smallest wave is going to come in and push you over. But if you plant your feet and you hop just a little bit, couple inches, when that wave comes, little or, not giant, but, reasonable size wave, if you hop, the wave will break around you. And so it's an idea that we can get our head around when we are dealing with grief. I don't have to deal with all of this wave. I just need a little hop. And so we start to build these toolbox of little hops. Maybe it's a favorite picture, a favorite song, favorite memory. And so I encourage my clients to start compiling. It could be a physical box. It could be a journal. It could be a playlist on your phone or a photo album. So when that wave of grief comes, they have something tangible that they can reach for and say, okay, there's my little hop tools. And it's how we can start to not completely get bowled over by the waves of grief that can often be the start of that process. And over time, the waves will get less, but having something that we can hold on to and say, this, I know this will help me, can be, it's a life raft. It's something tethered, when in grief, we just feel completely untethered.
Yeah. First of all, I'm a visual person, so I love your picture. Really puts it in perspective. I've been to Hollywood, Florida. It's really nice there. Love the big waves too. And I love your analogy of the wave. I've never thought of it like that, but you're absolutely spot on. Because I've done all that, the little hops. I was just visualizing that whole thing when you're talking about it and talking myself through it. And I love that. That's a perfect suggestion for people.
Thank you. It has to be easy. It has to be something we can easily get our head around, because when we're in grief, it's hard to focus. It's hard to focus on something. And
can you think of any other things when someone's really, that grief is just really overwhelming in the moment, one simple thing they could do that could help them ground themselves?
Breath work is a big part of it. Breath work is a big part of it. When we start to feel panic of, oh my gosh, it's a wave of grief, I don't know what to do, breath work. And so one of the things, and again, keeping it very, very simple, and I call it conscious breath. I know there's box breathing and a lot of different ways that people do this, but I teach people to put their tongue on the roof of their mouth. Meditation teachers will often talk about this as well, because it occupies the left brain. And so it also means you have to breathe through your nose. I mean, you could breathe through your mouth, but if you put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and you breathe in as deeply as you can, and I encourage people to breathe in as deep as they can, take in as much air as you can, and then hold it, because they have to focus. There's this idea with hiccups. Now, there's a million different remedies for hiccups. This idea that I had heard one time about hiccups, that if you focus so intently on one thing, and the thing I had heard was try to pull one hair out of your head, one single hair. The idea is that you're focusing so intently on one thing, the hiccups go away. And honestly, it mostly works, which is good, because I get hiccups a lot. But it's the same kind of idea. You have to pay attention to what you're doing, which means you're not paying attention to all the other stuff. So you put your tongue on the roof of your mouth, you breathe in as deeply as you possibly can, filling up your entire body like it was a balloon, no shoulders, right? And you hold it, and then you blow it out your mouth. And while you're blowing, you bring your belly back to your spine. So you get your body as empty and deflated balloon as you can, and then you hold it again. And so if we do that 3 times, we've cleaned all the oxygen in the blood, and we're able to calm ourselves. And one of the things that happens in grief is we feel helpless. And if we can do that, is grounding, because it feels like I have some modicum of control somewhere. I can breathe. And so that's one of the other things that we start with, as well as the breath work. Simple. Just deep breath in, deep breath out.
Yeah, I do the box breathing for my yoga class, and just 4 rounds, and they always find it, just that 4 rounds, how calming it could be, just like that. And it's, what is it, 2-3 minutes?
That Goldie Hawn has a whole organization where she goes into elementary schools, and they teach kids just that, 3 breaths. They're just 3, and they breathe in and they breathe out. And I don't know all of her particulars, but her organization goes into schools, and in these schools, the kids have better grades. They have less behavioral problems. There's less disciplinary issues. And her organization is trying constantly to get this into more and more schools, because mindful breath work can cure a whole lot of things. And it's a great place to start.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I got a great question for you. Maybe.
Okay.
How do you think grief, or what do you think grief teaches us about love?
Oh, such a good question. The actor Eric Dane just passed away from ALS.
Did you watch the Netflix? Whew.
Oh, I did. I saw his interview in the wheelchair. Oh my gosh. And then I saw the tribute that the Grey's Anatomy TV show had done. And you can see it. It's on YouTube, just that clip that they made of his character, that he was on the show for so long. But one of the things that he said as his character was, don't waste a minute, don't waste a breath. And I think that's really that's what grief teaches us. My friend Michael, who died, and the anniversary of his partner's passing was actually just this week, Paul, when Michael called me, and Michael and I had been, mommy and me best friends for, our sons are 28 and 29 now. And he called me and said, I'm sick. And 6 weeks later, it was a funeral.
Wow.
I mean, you just don't know.
That's tough.
And, I was talking with a girlfriend of mine earlier today about unexpected grief. Her husband was suffering with dementia, and then he was gone. Like, they really thought they had several more years, and his body just said, nope, we're done. And so we just don't know. And so what grief reminds us is to breathe, and grief reminds us to love, because we can't bring them back, but we absolutely can hold on to the love. And I think it's essential that we talk about our loved ones, and not everybody is ready for that. And one of the things I encourage in my clients is, if you would like to speak their name, if you would like to hear people speak their name and to talk about them, and some people are not ready for that, and that's okay. But remembering them and reminding people how wonderful that they were, and how they are, because we know as mediums they're still here. I think that that's so important. And I heard a quote just the other day. It was shared by Tig Notaro, but it was her friend Andrea who wrote it, that said, essentially, when we die, the love that we feel for each other lives on as a reflection in the other people that are who we are, and how we love and we're loved is now reflected in the people who are still here. And I have butchered that quote, but that was the gist. And I think that that's really important. So grief teaches us, I hope grief teaches us it's okay to love. I would like my clients to come away with that.
It's okay to keep loving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and that takes time. I mean, that is part of that. If I open this door and allow myself to feel,
Right.
But that takes time. But love, I mean, that's the answer.
So what do you think it looks like to carry grief on a daily basis without letting it carry us?
Oh, gosh. It could be anything from A to Z. I mean, it could be overeating. It could be, how grief shows up it could be listening to very loud music. It can be, there are so many coping mechanisms. Some are more healthy than others. What I teach my clients is how they carry the grief is an acceptance that there's always going to be a level, right? There's always going to be a level. We're never not going to remember them, hopefully. And we're never not going to feel that pang, regardless of how many years have gone by. I spoke with a client the other day. Her daughter has been gone for, her son has been gone for about 15 years. And still, the minute she spoke, it's right there. So acceptance is one of the things, and that's hard because we keep expecting our loved one to walk in the door, and there's a period of time of allowing our brain to wrap around that new reality. And having our coping mechanisms and having people that we can talk to is really important to help us walk through grief, which is another reason why this work is so important, because so many people have no idea what to say to someone who's in grief. I was at a Zoom memorial a while back, and every single person said, I don't know what to say, but. And that's the fact. People just don't know what to say. And so part of my work is not just working with people who are grieving, but it's also with my podcast, Beyond the Loss. It's called Beyond the Loss, Conversations in Grief Education and Healing, because I want to educate normal people who are not yet dealing with grief. Because let's face it, we're all going to deal with grief. That is simply a fact of being alive. And so if we can learn how to support people in grief, like, let me just say, we never say, well, at least, don't ever, please don't ever say to a griever, well, at least they're not suffering, or at least they're not, just, that would be a no.
I think an important thing not to say to people is the time length, because there's never a time, like you just said about the 15 years, grief can last a lifetime after the event, a lifetime. And if people are holding on to it, I think you need to meet them where they're at and be there with them,
Absolutely.
no matter what, how much time has passed.
Kelsey Grammer has a newish book out. I think it's called Karen, which is the name of his sister who was brutally murdered. And she was murdered 50 years ago.
Wow.
And he still shows up for the parole hearings for the perpetrators. And he still carries a level of grief. He has done a lot of work on himself and on that process to come to a place of peace. And it was interesting what he says is about, he was remembering his sister as a victim and not as the wonderful, vibrant, lively, intelligent, beautiful woman that she was. But that was 50 years ago.
Right.
And so we don't get over it. We just bring it with us. So it's always walking with us in some way. But that was a choice that he made to carry anger and despair and victim imagery versus choosing to carry love for his sister. We don't have to love the perpetrators, but carrying that love and remembering her in the way that she was. And that becomes a choice too. And that takes people a long time, especially when you have parents of suicide, which is a big problem right now. And that, those parents, that takes a long time to shift. Some people don't, they're not capable of shifting. So we carry it in a lot of different ways. And grief is different for everyone. There is no one right way. There is no, like you say, timeline. There is no, oh, you had your funeral on Saturday, you're back to work on Monday, right? You're ready. Okay. There just isn't a timeline, and there isn't one only right way. It's different for everyone.
My friend Ashley commented that sometimes people don't know what to say, so they don't say anything. What would you say to people that are uncomfortable even having a conversation, being with somebody and knowing someone has had a loss and suffered a loss, but they still don't want to acknowledge it?
Yeah. Sometimes we can just look that person in the eye and just give them a nod and just say,
yeah,
that can be enough. A hand squeeze can be enough. A card in the mail. The one thing that I really talk to people who are trying to support grievers about is don't rush to the front of the line. Okay? If someone has had a loss in their family, there's a lot going on. They may have to deal with wills and putting things in other people's names and planning a funeral. There's a lot, and a lot of family may come, and there may be a lot of food. And so we don't need to avoid all that, but we also don't need to rush to the front of the line. And so one of the things I say to people who ask, how can I best support someone who's dealing with grief, is you can let them know that you're supporting them now, but wait 2 weeks, maybe 3, and then step in. Because at that point, all the rush has died down, all the family has gone home, all the food's been eaten, and there's this, now I'm alone. Now I'm alone with this giant bucket of grief. And having people who can still step in 2-3 weeks later can make a huge difference. And it doesn't matter. I don't want to say it doesn't matter what you say, because there's definitely things we would prefer you not to say.
Right.
We definitely don't tell people who've lost a child that, God must have needed an angel, or, everything happens for a reason. I think there's purpose in most things, and there are blessings in most things. But to tell a parent who's lost a child that everything happens for a reason, that's a hard one. So it's enough to simply say, I'm here and I see you. But again, I tell people, maybe don't rush to the front of the line with your casserole. Give it some time, because people forget. But in 2 weeks, most people have forgotten because they're back with their life, you know? So maybe put a little ping on your calendar that you can reach out to people a little later. It makes a big difference.
Yeah. Do you believe grief and joy can exist alongside each other?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely, I do. And that's hard because then there's guilt that goes right in there.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yep.
There's guilt that goes right in there. I had such fun earlier this week to do a mediumship session with a lovely woman whose nephew had come in, and he was just a hoot. And I really, you have sometimes those sessions in mediumship where you can just feel the joy and the humor and the love that is there, and it's just a fun reading to do. But that was one of the things that we talked about was it's okay to feel joy. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to, allow that to be part of the grief process. Grief is not linear. It definitely goes up and down and around in circles. And joy is part of it. And we don't have to look and go, oh, I laughed. Oh, I'm supposed to be sad. No. Our loved ones don't want us to be sitting in the corner in the dark with the lights off, crying for the rest of forever. They want us to laugh. They want us to live. They want us to remember the good things about them and not so much about the hard things or the end things. So yeah, they absolutely. And so we work on bringing joy in without holding on to the guilt, that it's okay to feel joy. Yeah.
That's great advice. Yeah, totally. Because you're right. That guilt just sneaks right in for sure.
Quickly.
So do you believe that grief can change who you are? And I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean it in a good way.
I do. I really do. It can make us more compassionate. It can make us better listeners. Now, in the beginning, it can make us pretty selfish, and that's okay because that's normal, but there's something about humanity. For all the negativity that we see on the news or whatever, it's easy to find that stuff. But when people that are around us are in need, our innate instinct is usually to help. And so when you have someone who has walked that walk, who sees someone else in pain, it is natural for us to say, wait a minute, I can help here. Now, we are not going to necessarily carry someone else's burden, then we deprive them of the path that they're on. But to say, I can walk with you, I can be part of this, I can share my wisdom, and for whatever it's worth, take what works for you. And so I do think that when people who have really come through deep grief, now it can also go the other way, and people can be bitter, and they can stay in that anger and loss, and I have seen that for people who chose not to receive help. They didn't want to think about it in a different way. They didn't want to be coached to come out of their grief. They were happy in it. That gave them comfort, and there's truth in that too. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes they just don't want to let go of that memory, that thought, that feeling. Yeah, I think it goes back to the guilt thing again, in all honesty.
Yeah, very much.
So do you believe there's a way to honor our grief without staying defined by it?
I believe there's a way to honor our loved ones without being defined by the loss. Right? I don't think we want to honor our grief. I think we want to cohabitate with our grief. Because when we say we're going to honor our grief, we may be giving that the control. And I don't think that's a healthy way, in my opinion. But to honor our loved ones. I have a client whose son was killed on the highway and on his motorcycle. And I have worked with her and her family for many years now. And they had established a 5K in his honor, and he had been an organ donor. And so they're still counting the number of lives he saved.
I love that.
One of the people who had the family of the people of the child that had received his heart recorded the heartbeat and put it in like a Build-A-Bear and brought it to the 5K a few years ago. So, I mean, there are ways that we can choose to honor our loved ones. People have, made scholarships. They have friends who they go to a certain space in the neighborhood and they watch the sunset on their loved one's anniversary of passing. And that's what they do. It's something simpler, but that's how they want to honor the loved one. And they bring, cupcakes or cookies or whatever that they bring. So it's not how we honor our grief. It's how we honor our loved ones. that makes a big difference.
I love that so much. You've really brought great insight into this topic. You have great insight about grief, and I'm sure this has been very helpful to so many people to listen in on this conversation this evening for sure. I've enjoyed it. Time goes by so fast. I have a question that I always like to end with for my guests, and it is, what is the most important lesson you have learned on your spiritual journey?
That love doesn't die.
Oh.
That love doesn't die. That, we have love from source into incarnation, into our life, if we'll allow it, and then back into spirit. And that love is the most powerful engine of the universe. That is the thing that powers the universe in my mind. So love doesn't die.
Love's powerful. It sure is powerful. I know you said you've been through Lily Dell one time, so hopefully you're going to find your way back to Lily Dell again.
I look forward
Because
to
we
it.
do, we all are about, so many people come to Lily Dell in grief and needing that healing and loving atmosphere. And maybe you'll be offering some classes in the near future for Lily Dell too. That'd be a great thing.
Thank you.
Remind people of your website, of how to get in touch with you.
Yes, absolutely. So my website is my name, sherrydworkinsmith.com. You can see on the screen, my name has a hyphen. So when you look for me online, take out the hyphen. My podcast right now, my podcast, Beyond the Loss, Conversations in Grief, Education, and Healing, for the rest of March, is located on A1R Radio. That is on Tuesdays at 3. And then we're moving to Mind, Body, Spirit FM in the summertime. So I'm really looking forward to that. There's lots of stuff that's going on. And if I can help, if you want to ask a question, just fill out the form on my website and I'll get back to you as fast as I can. Grief education starts with a question. Is this grief? Is, whatever the question may be. And I think one of the most important things I tell people in grief is we're all going to have some. That's just it, that we're all going to have some, but we don't have to carry it alone. So.
And also, if anybody wants to share any comments or questions here on the Facebook page, feel free to do so. We will both check back on it periodically and the rest of the week and answer your questions as you post them. You've been a lovely guest. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Thank you all for being here for my 3rd year anniversary of Enlightening Your Way. I will be back again in 2 weeks with another show and another guest. I'm sure you've been aware, if you've been paying attention to our Facebook page, that we've been posting a bunch of events coming up for our summer season. The season highlights are out. They're starting to post all the workshops, some over 200 workshops we'll be having this summer. So there's a lot going on in Lily Dell. So make sure and check back on this page daily for everything going on. And hope you'll be making your reservations to come visit us this year in Lily Dell. Also, my Facebook page, Wellness with Nancy Lombardo, and my Instagram, nancy.k.lombardo, where my motto is protecting and serving your well-being. My name is Nancy Lombardo. Thank you so much, Sherry, for joining me this evening. Thank you all for joining us, and I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.